Hi everyone, this is Pradeep from Sydney, wishing you all a very happy good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever it is in your part of the day, or night, or afternoon. Welcome to the 18th episode of GCC Global Chapters and Connections. And let me first mute everybody, and when I ask the people to speak, then people can unmute themselves. So, GCC is a global engagement platform for the alumni from IIT Delhi. What it aims to do is to set up a global platform, a value adding global platform where alumni from all over the world can connect with each other on a value driven basis. Now, the definition of value can vary from person to person, and it doesn't really matter whether it is give back, nation building, mentoring, professional growth, or even getting married or even getting your kids married. So long there is a value proposition, so be it. But that apart, we bring senior alumni from all over the world to not only revisit their journey post IIT Delhi, but discuss topical themes. And we've got some very, very interesting speakers today. And we've also got some very, very interesting themes. So, first of all, I must acknowledge and thank Sunil Mishra. He has been the go between, and he is the one who spoke to Ashish, spoke to Sunil Chopra, spoke to Pradipta. I did not know them. He was the one, he introduced them. So let's give a big round of applause to Sunil Mishra for putting together this session. And let me tell you that this is session number 2 of batch of 1981. Because all the 4 people that I said, they finished IIT Delhi in 1981. And in earlier sessions, we've had Pattu, we've had, what is that guy, Shastri. Yes, the Lochan. We've got some lovely people, as we've had so many other lovely alumni from IIT Delhi. So, whom do we have with us today? We have the three leaders from where? From the academia. And in alphabetical order, we have Ashish Nanda, who's 1981 IIT Delhi, then IIM Ahmedabad, and then he's been oscillating in between India and Australia. And I will not steal his thunder from him, but please give a big round of applause to Ashish. And followed by Ashish, whom do we have? We have Pradipta. Again, IIT Delhi 1981, and then he was doing something in the US. Well, after that, let's keep it a secret, but please give a big round of applause to Pradipta. And then finally, last but not the least, is Sunil Mishra, who airlifted himself from IIT Delhi in 1981 and has been living over there all the while. And please give a big round of applause to Sunil Chopra. And for this, I hand it over to Sunil Mishra to talk a bit more about the batch of 91 and these 3 amigos that we've got over here today. So over to you, Sunil Mishra.
Thank you, Pradeep, and great to see my friends from almost 40 years ago. I think that the idea of this session actually germinated when I was chatting with Pradipta over WhatsApp. We'd already had one session of the the 81 batch, with talking with the promotion and Satish Singh, and said, which is the 81 batch, at least in my mind, is such a distinguished batch in many ways, with the exception of Patrus like me. So we'll leave that aside. So we thought it does make sense to introduce our batch as part of the engagement model for the Alumni Association with another session, and hopefully we'll do one more. So I'll just spend a minute on the batch and the gentleman here. I call 1981 sort of the awkward teenage years of IIT. I think, if I remember correctly, we were the 16th graduating batch since the founding of IIT Delhi. So you can either call us the Sweet 16 batch or the awkward teenage year batch, which we didn't really know what we wanted to do. And it was a phenomenal time, right? We were right there in the middle of the, the period of emergency in India. We were there when student unrest was going on. We were there was a labor issue in our hostels, if you guys recall, and phenomenal change, right? I think we were the first batch where attendance became non-compulsory, so that had a immediate impact on the CGPA of guys like me. But again, leave that aside for a moment. The first batch to start using calculators and things of that nature. So, and we had a phenomenal time, right? And we have really phenomenal folks, distinguished gentlemen here in front of you. And let me just say a word or two about each one of them. Ashish Nanda was, one of the first of 1981 batch. Was the first time we had 10 pointers. In other words, folks graduating for, going through 5 years and not getting a single B. And Ashish was one of the two. H.V. Jagdish was the other. She was also the gold medalist, has had a tremendous experience with both the corporate world and the academic world, including running distinguished, prestigious institution like IIM Ahmedabad, which are now Copen and others are graduates of. So, gives an interesting perspective of, being a student. We used to look up to the directors and, the leadership in the institute. We never could place ourselves in their shoes. So it'd be interesting to hear from all three of them, because they have been in that part of the cycle, right? So great to have Ashish. He's at Harvard Business School, was with Harvard Law before, and I'll let him, introduce himself as we go forward. Pradipta is not only my batchmate, even though he's from Aravali, we won't hold that against him. Not only my batchmate, but he was my schoolmate at St. Columbus. So we go back even more than 40 years, probably almost 50 years. He and Patu and I, and a few others who were part of the Columbus gang in Delhi. Pradipta, phenomenal guy. He's one of the smartest guys I know. Ran the IIT Roorkee as a director, and is not afraid of making tough and controversial decisions, which I'm sure he'll talk about a little bit, right? Again, welcome. Great to have you, Pradipta. And Sunil Chopra has the great advantage of having a great first name. So he was one of the 5 Sunils in our batch. Probably the most distinguished and accomplished Sunil in our batch. Was with NYU before this, and has been with Kellogg for a long time, including a stint as the dean there. And well, not a well-known fact, I'm sure people know. He's actually written a book on supply chain. And I think it came out about 10 years ago. If the leadership had paid attention to it, we wouldn't be in this trouble today. So again, I can't say no good things about Sunil Chopra. So with that, looking forward to a great conversation. Pradeep, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Sunil. And let me kickstart the discussion first with Ashish. Ashish, tell me, you got a lot of these gold medals. Are they actually in gold? Or they just palm off some medal to you and say, this is a gold medal?
Pradeep, I have no idea, but I have memories of those medals are like gold to me. And more than me, it's very interesting to my wife. So every once in a while, she'll take them out, put them there, and tell me and ask me. She'll say, Ashish, tell me a story about, she'll pick one of them about this. They just remind me more than anything else. They are mementos. They remind me of the wonderful success and opportunities I have been blessed with. As you know, Pradeep, having been at IIT, whether you are number 1 or number 10 or number 50, the numbers are more a matter of a throw of dice. People are so smart and so bright, but they're wonderful like gold to me anyway. I must say one other thing. Sunil Mishra, when he welcomed us, he said, "I'm so glad people answered my call." Well, when Sunil Mishra calls, you answer him. We learned that from 1976 onwards. He's a very dear friend, and he's, every batch has some people who are like the fulcrum of the batch. I see Kalpen here. He has been across batches. Sunil is like that for our batch. He has stayed in touch with people, and he has been so generous and so welcoming. So Sunil, thank you very much for getting us together again.
So, I love the response when you said about golden memories, and I'm sure your mother would have even loved the gold medals more than you. But now coming back to, you've been oscillating between India and Australia. You have been, in a sense, having the best of both the worlds. You've been seeing the education system, almost the top education systems in both the countries. So, what has been your journey like? And given the choice, would you like to be once again the studious guy who keeps winning gold medals? So, what's the story? What has been your journey post IIT Delhi?
Yes, Pradeep, thank you. I have loved oscillating to Australia, but most of my oscillations have been between India and US. And I have loved both of these. Let me begin by identifying, saying something I tell my students at Harvard Business School. Last class there's a tradition for instructors to just share some of their experiences. And so I tell them, I say, you are very bright, you're very smart, but guess what? I have seen others who are perhaps equally smart, at least, as you. And when I say that to them, flashes before my eyes the batch in IIT Delhi that I was in, the students I have had at IIM Ahmedabad. So the first observation, Pradeep, is quality of students is extraordinary in Indian, at least the premier Indian institutions I've had the fortune to be associated with. It matches the very best anywhere in the world. So that's the first thing I would say. There are some differences which I hope we will discuss later. The second part of your question was, would I like to be the same studious person that I was before? My answer is no, really, Pradeep. And in fact, when I was in IIT, I was a young, when I joined IIT, I was 15 years old. Today I look at 15-year-old kids and I think they are so young and so malleable. And I had done well in my higher secondary exams. So I came to IIT Delhi and I was very surprised, very fortunate to see such brilliant people around me. But I was also a little bit taken aback by the competitiveness of people at IIT, at least the people I confronted. And early in my first year at IIT Delhi, I took it upon myself to justify to other people in my batch that there was good reason why I had done well in my higher secondary. And it became almost burdensome to me, Pradeep. My years at IIT Delhi, Sunil was very kind. He reminded people that I had 10. I'll tell you a joke. People of our generation will remember it. When our junior batch was bidding us goodbye, they called Jagdish and me Bo Derek because again, movie 10. So there was that joy, but there was a lot I sacrificed to get good grades. I used to be a very good debater. I stopped doing that. I used to enjoy playing sports, limited that. And so one of the lessons I learned for myself, and it took me too long, third, fourth year, I said, forget the grades, focus on the education, do the best, try to enjoy life. And from there, whatever you learn is fine. And then immediately after that, I had gone to IIM, and that's the attitude I took. I felt like there was enormous release. Things I learned stuck with me. I enjoyed life a lot more. So Pradeep, going back, I think as a 15-year-old, I would not have tried to live up to other people's expectations. It was a lesson that I learned very, through experience. So back to your question, would I like to be the studious person getting gold medals? No. Would I like to be the studious person studying stuff that I'm interested in, excited in? And gold medal maybe is one of the consequences, or maybe not? Yes.
What a lovely response. And I believe it's your birthday today.
It is. I'm ripe old age of 61 years, Pradeep. And thank you, Sunil. What a nice way to celebrate it. Then,
wishing you a very, very happy birthday. And do you know whom it was who prompted me? It was Kalpen Shukla, who sent me a private message and said, that it is Ashish's birthday today. So, folks, first of all, let's wish Ashish a very, very happy birthday. And we look forward to seeing many more such lovely occasions in the future.
Thank you. Pradeep, if at age 61 your friends are still wishing you warm birthdays, you feel very fortunate. So thank you, Pradeep.
And Ashish, let me tell you that I'm 66. So next time when you meet me, maybe you have to touch my feet also, but that's another side of the story, So let's move across to Pradipta. Pradipta, tell me, you are, in a sense, a product of 3 IITs. You are an alumni of IIT Delhi. You were a dean of what? Alumni affairs at IIT Bombay. You were a director at IIT Roorkee. So if I had to give you a choice as to choose between the 3 IITs, which one you go for? Pradipta, are you there, or possibly you could be on mute? Pradipta, you're on mute.
Okay. Sorry. I was, I just have to say one thing that, just to be the sake that when I was director at IIT Roorkee, IIT Bombay was the top-ranked institution from India. The IIT Delhi was the second-ranked institution, very close to IIT Bombay, and IIT Roorkee was the third place institution from India. So I could claim that I was part of 3 top institutions from India, internationally renowned. So that I think. See, other than that, I don't think there is at the undergraduate level. At the undergraduate level, there's very little difference between the IITs. I mean, let's say that the original 5 IITs, IIT Roorkee, which used to be Roorkee University earlier, which became IIT Roorkee, and IIT Guwahati, which started in 1992. So I think there's very little difference in the undergraduate program. The differences that happen are in the research areas. And that is very, very individually faculty driven. So it's almost bottom up. There's very little that you can, let's say as director of IIT Roorkee, I could do very little. Only thing that I tried to do was kind of bring people together across themes, on centers and those kind of. That's something that you can do. Otherwise, the research excellence is very, very faculty driven, and so there are huge differences between the the 3 IITs that I've been part of. But as I said, it's been fun.
I love it. You have absolutely amplified the one team approach, said everything about everybody else, but just not answered the question. But that's okay. We will come back to you. Let me go across to Sunil Chopra. Sunil, you gallivanted to the US after IIT Delhi and never looked back. Man, how has been your journey? I know that you making great, a lot of tons of money, as well as you've also been the dean and I don't know what all at Kellogg's. So, but what exactly has been the journey post IIT Delhi?
I think unlike many of my colleagues on this call who are much more mature and thoughtful about what they are doing, in my case, I just I think chance played a bigger role than anything else. So I started after post IIT at Hindustan Levers, but I can tell you I had not yet left the orientation program, and I knew I was not cut out for that job. So fortunately, there were wonderful people there, and they let me stay the whole year, even though they also knew I was not cut out for that job. Then, just to give you how chance, whereas, Ashish actually knows a lot about business and Pradipta knows a lot about engineering, and they went on to lead, business and engineering institutions. I have a degree in applied math, so I know nothing about business. I have never taken a course in business, never, ever, not even one. The first case I taught to business students was that was the first case I ever saw. So, I can give you a whole sort of logic, but my ending up at a business school was pure coincidence. So, then it just coincidentally, I love being at Kellogg, so I've stayed there ever since. So it's not like I had a very thoughtful. So even I will give you, Sunil Mishra mentioned the book I wrote. I'll give you the story behind that. When I moved to Kellogg, they asked me, well, you have to teach a core class and an elective. So I asked them, which elective what are my options? They said, you can teach an elective on inventory management or logistics management. So I said, I'll pick logistics management because I know absolutely nothing about it. So that was my origin. And I will then finish the story. So I started reading the books and I didn't understand any book. So I said, I have to start writing things myself. And that ended up as a book. But I came up with this fancy title for the book. And my editor gave me the best advice. He said, don't try to be fancy. Just give basically what it is. Call it supply chain management. And I would say that is the best advice my editor ever gave me. Again, pure coincidence in my case. So that's my journey. I want to sort of close with the sentence on making money. When you do your PhD, they always tell you doing a PhD is giving up current income in order to give up future income. So I just want people.
Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So here I have three guys who are IITians and who've been leader in whatever profession they wanted to or chose to be in. And my question, and I'll go to Ashish over here. So in a sense, what IIT system is doing is they are getting the cream of the lot from India through the highly competitive process. So the question is that what is the value add by IIT? I mean, these people would have done well anyway.
Yeah, Pradeep, there was a professor at Harvard University Economics Department, later became the Dean of Stanford Business School. He actually wrote a very famous economics article which said that the maximum value added by top academic institutions to students is that they are selecting amongst the students and putting a stamp on them that so-and-so got selected by, whether you call it IIT or you call it Harvard or you call it Stanford. So there is a lot of truth, Pradeep, to the fact that some of the perceived value add in these institutions is that they act as sieve institutions. From a large number of people, they select the best and kind of signal to the world, these are people best on our dimensions. By the way, that's not something to be kind of taken lightly, Pradeep, particularly if in a developing country over decades, an academic institution has maintained a reputation for in a very unbiased manner, selecting the best of people without pressure on it. This is not an easy thing to achieve, and we in IIT should feel very proud of the fact that various IIT leaders have not succumbed to any kind of temptations or pressures. And even to this day, when somebody gets into an IIT, people say they've gotten because of merit. So, and again, merit, however we define it, and that's something to be celebrated in the IITs. The second part, what is the value add in the education? I will again kind of mention this. I've got a lot of people from my batch, Sunil Mishra, Chopra, Pradipta. You know what? A lot of us learned a lot of things in the charpais outside surds. So you learn a lot outside of classroom, Pradeep. And you learn it through osmosis, you learn it from your friends, you learn it from their habits, you learn it from conversations. So I would not understate the value of learning from some of your colleagues. But that becomes lifelong learning. It becomes lifelong learning. It's amazing how much people keep bumping into one another. So you mentioned Patanjali Keswani. He and I have now bumped into each other on at least 5 different occasions at 5 different stages of our life, whether it is, earlier in 2 schools in Delhi, or it is in IIT, then later in different IIMs meeting each other, then in TAS, and then otherwise. And so what happens very often is you make networks of relationships with people or friendships that really thrive and nurture you through life. So that's the second learning. Then I would not understate the third level of learning, which is from some of your teachers and instructors. I must say, during my time at IIT Delhi, the quality of teaching was very variable. I remember there were some classes where we used to say the teacher is teaching to the board and the students are learning from the books. And it just happens to be that sometimes they're in the same classroom. So there were some faculty where really quality of learning from the faculty was very little, but there were some other faculty where their passion, their enthusiasm, their engagement opened absolutely new vistas for you. And, the projects you did, the work you did, and sometimes the role modeling they would do, you learn from that also. So I would not understate all 3 of these elements, really.
Man, I would love to convey your perspectives to the current directors, and they'll be thrilled about it. But not a problem. It is fabulous. Now let me move across to Sunil Chopra. Sunil, the post-pandemic, and I don't even know whether post-pandemic is the right word, because we still seem to be, the pandemic is continuing and the new normal seems to keep changing by the day. We are living in a world where there are severe supply chain shocks. There is a whole lot of discussion which is happening all over the world, and the world stock markets are hinging on whether the inflation is going to be transitory or whether it has got more permanent impact, and are the central bankers behind the curve or not. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, you're asking so many things that I don't know about, but in my career, that has never stopped me from giving opinions on stuff, right? So let me start with the supply chain stuff. I think in some sense, what was new in the supply chain was the initial shock of COVID. What we are seeing now in terms of shortages, in terms of price rises, actually, it's just getting a lot of press for 2 reasons. One, it's post-COVID. Second, we are seeing some inflation after a long time. But basically, there is a phenomenon which we study in the supply chain management called the Bullwhip Effect. Basically, the term comes from, like the whip, a person has a small flick of the wrist and the other end of the bullwhip fluctuates a lot. What we are seeing today in the supply chain is at least various versions of that, and this is throughout COVID. The first article before COVID related to supply chain management I read came out of Hong Kong and Australia, talking about toilet paper shortages.
Australia was the first one.
Yeah, toilet paper shortages. Let's just step back a minute and think about it. Do you think COVID changed the consumption of toilet paper? I suspect not, right? And we were having toilet paper shortages. And I loved the article about from Hong Kong because it said, that's telling you that people are taking the pandemic seriously. So this was the article. It came before, it came early. It's telling you that this is the early warning signal that tells you that people are taking COVID seriously. It's a long way of saying, right? Yes, I think there are some shortages. The shortages are related to essentially some of the, for example, US retailers. Walmart, in fact, has put out a statement, we have no shortages on shelves. Why? Because they actually ordered early. So by September, the Walmarts of the world are overloaded. But you see, what that does is the following. Right now, the US ports are full of containers. Whether they are in the ports, they are in the boats, or they are with Walmart, which means there are no containers in China. So even if everything else is working, you can't ship them because there are not enough containers in China, right? So my point simply is that this is a phenomenon which will play out. And, in the old days, we might have linked it to business cycles. I cannot tell you whether it won't take 2 months to play out. It will take longer than that. But I would be shocked if 18 months from now, we are discussing supply chain shortages. I cannot say the same about inflation. I don't know anything about inflation.
But I love the way that you kind of showcase the example of toilet paper and how you kind of showed through what is happening in the current thing. And I'll come back to you on that for more. Then let me go across to Pradipta. Pradipta, 2013 was called the year of the MOOCs. 2014 was called the year of the backlash of the MOOCs. And I'm still waiting for the day when I do a subject from MOOC A and a subject from MOOC B. Maybe attend a course at maybe one of these IITs or maybe at Harvard or something like that, and get a credential from somewhere. So where are we in this journey? Pradipta? I hope you are not on mute.
I'm so sorry. I keep myself on mute so that I don't disturb others. Yeah, and then I forget to unmute myself. Yeah. So as far as as far as India is concerned, we've traveled the MOOC distance much earlier than other places in the world, purely because there's a huge disparity between the IITs and the other institutions. Let me put it this way: today there are about 23 IITs. There's variable teaching there too. And then you have the National Institutes of Technology, which used to be the research. And there are a few other institutions which are reasonably good. But then there are thousands and thousands of educational institutions where the teaching doesn't exist. So to a certain extent, to address that, MOOCs was started, I think, around 2000 in India. Under a thing called the National Program of Technology Enhanced Learning, NPTEL, and what the IITs did was through video courses and web courses, we created 1,000 courses at different levels, from first year undergraduate all the way up to graduate studies. Now the thing was that it was done for India, okay? And of course, what we are also doing now is kind of having certification kind of things where teachers are also part of the teaching programs, and then there's a certification part which IIT is also involved in. It's a separate part, another national program. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it's really funny that it was supposed to be for Indian students. And it was put up on YouTube for our students. And what happened was that it was used all over the world, literally. I mean, when you have 1,000 courses taught by some very, very good people, one of the things that we did was we took what Ashish said, is that there are some people who teach subject well. We took those people who teach the subjects well, and they taught those subjects, and that had a tremendous trickle down effect all over the world. There's one program which India, IIT Bombay was involved in with Ethiopia, direct satellite connection, teaching undergraduates in Ethiopia directly, live classes. So I think these are some of the things. So all I'm saying is that MOOC, the MOOC program was actually kind of started as Coursera, edX, Coursera from Stanford, edX from MIT. Those were the kinds of things. But in India, we started way back, and therefore the effect has been much longer. And of course, today what's happening is people are beginning to teach live, because of satellite connections, direct linkages, all those kinds of things. So it's working out. It is helping. It is doing what it's supposed to do. Now, as far as what you were talking about is whether you can be, whether you can, let me put it this way, there's nothing that stops you from taking. But if it's a certification, we do now have where we've linked, at least IITs have linked their continuing education program for professionals with the, these courses that exist.
So Pradipta, my question is different. I took MOOCs as an example. The question is that can I take a subject from IIT Delhi, a subject from IIT Roorkee, whether it is online or whether it is face to face, and yet take another subject from IIT Bombay, and can I get a credential?
Yeah. So the point that I'm trying to make is that this is something that we are looking at. See, the IITs, it's a little bit easier, primarily because we've always been a credit-based system. So, you take courses, and so what happens is you can take courses anywhere. But the basic problem that happens is your own institution recognizing those courses for a degree is what? So to a certain extent, what happened was, Devang was the IIT Bombay director at that time. Another IIT Bombay colleague of ours was the IIT Delhi director, and I was at IIT Roorkee, and we wrote we put together an MOU between IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, and IIT Roorkee, where students, so what happened was that the institutions would accept the fact that if students went from one place to another place and took courses, it would be counted towards the degree. So that was that. But that, it requires today, because every degree requires the degree granting institutions to accept what is being taught elsewhere. Okay, so that's there's this equivalence and all of those kinds of things. We do it across the world also. In IIT Bombay, one of the things that I did was create with Purdue and Kellogg. Our business school, Kellogg, and MIT, Sloan School. They did this entire program. So I'm saying that, but it requires a structure. And
so in other words, what we are saying is it is work in progress.
It's work in progress, for certainly.
I understand. Let's now go across to Ashish. Ashish, you've also been director of IIM Ahmedabad. Now, I understand that a lot of what I'm talking about is also related to the mode of funding of the IITs and IIMs. IITs still get a lot of funding from the government, whereas I understand IIMs don't get that much of a funding from the government, or possibly nothing. I don't know, I'm not across that. But the question is that IIT Delhi, having embarked on an endowment fund, like what Harvard and any of the Ivy League universities over there do, are endowment funds really relevant in the Indian context? Are the Indian corporates willing to give? Is that something which is an achievable objective?
So Pradeep, I'll start with a couple of stories here. Last evening, I had some visitors come from Surat, and I was taking them around Harvard Business School, and I took them to the most recent building of Harvard Business School. It's the most environmentally friendly building, gorgeous building. And the building's name is Tata Hall. And inside that building, I took them to a list of principal donors to Harvard University. And out of the 20 principal donors, there were 4 or 5 actually from India. That's the first story I want to tell you, which is, at least from my experience at Harvard, Indian donors are not stingy when it comes to being philanthropic towards education. The second story I'll tell you relates to IIM Ahmedabad. During my 4 years there, we were able to raise about 500 crores of rupees from Indian alumni and business folks. And they were very generous and very hands-off. And the only thing that I would emphasize, they asked for. One thing they asked for is that you will follow up with them. People are busy. So there should be folks who are willing to reach out to folks and say, would you like to contribute? I myself have been guilty on some occasions of not being responsive to my alma mater. It's not out of ill will, people get busy. So having some folks, some system, some process where people remind you in a generous, thoughtful manner if you wish to contribute. And by the way, it begins from the first year. So when I was in IIMA, I had a wonderful dean of alumni and external relations working with me, Arvind. And Arvind Sahai and I decided on the day of the students' graduation, we would challenge them that yesterday you were students, today you are alumni. Doesn't matter if you give 100 rupee each, but come together, have large participation and contribute something to the school. It's a spirit of contribution and a way of giving that you have to inculcate amongst people, preferably early on. The second part is you have to share the vision of where you want the institution to go, what is the exciting thing you are doing, listen to your alumni's input on what they suggest, so that they feel part of the journey. They don't feel distanced from where you are. They feel that you are listening to them. Then they share a little bit in the excitement and the vision of what you're doing. The third thing is to be grateful. I have found that in some Indian institutions, people are not grateful to folks who are generous to them. I have had some extraordinary stories of faculty saying to me, मेरे को भिखारी नहीं बनना, लोटा लेके जाऊंगा. You know, if that is the attitude you will take, then all you will get is bhiksha. You will not get contribution with partners. To recognize, to thank people for what they are contributing, you know, unless there is some nefarious reason, but through contracts and through relationships, you can counter that. And the last thing in an Indian context, you have to reassure the people who are giving money that it will be used appropriately. Whether it is through having some foundations, or it is by giving them every 6 months or every year a statement of how that money is being used or not used and how it is being managed. I think if you take care of these 4 things, Pradeep, India, the culture puts education very high. Our alumni have a great deal of goodwill for our institutions, and they want to contribute. So, and many of them are in a good position. Now, may not be people like Sunil and me. I loved your quote, Sunil Chopra, about academics. But, you know, there are people amongst us who have been blessed, and they recognize they have been blessed with material wealth and who are willing to share and contribute. So, Pradeep, there is great opportunity in this space. Only thing is, you have to be like everything else. You have to be a little bit disciplined and a little bit committed to raising funds.
If I were to...
Pradipta has been head of alumni and external relations. I don't know what Pradipta's experience is, but I think it's a very, very fertile and less used way of raising funds.
So in other words, if I were to summarize it, it comes down to one team approach, stakeholder engagement, you know, value proposition and good governance.
You got it. Very nice. You summarized it much fewer words and much more succinctly, Pradeep.
So
Thank
the
you.
reality, I think, what one, maybe it's a journey that everybody is on today, because it seems to be that there is a kind of a, short responses or a tactical approach today at the moment, where it needs to be much more broad-based, because the environment does have, it's very interesting to note that in Harvard, there were 4 or 5 Indian companies who were among the top 20. So that kind of shows, absolutely. And I want to go on to Pradipta. Again, Pradipta, you see, IIT Bombay has been known over the ages for very strong industry relations. Now, you have been, as Ashish also once again reiterated, you have been the Dean for Alumni Affairs over there. What do you think is the propensity, of the IIT ecosystem for endowment funds and for getting that contribution from the industry? What is lacking and what is happening?
Okay, so I'll take up what's happening first. Okay, see, one of the things that I'm now, this is very specific to IIT Bombay. That's what I know more about. In the beginning, I'll trace it back. Okay, this was the 1975 batch of IIT Bombay, which essentially at that time, director was Professor Sukhatme, and a lot of them had been taught by him. Okay, so alumni kind of, to be very fair, what Ashish pointed out, IIT Bombay was lucky that the alumni kind of organized, okay, and started donating. Okay, and they also participated from the IIT side. Okay, so they became part of IIT. I kind of brought in a lot of the alumni as part of the IIT system, so that all the money that was flowing in, they were able to tell their friends what was happening inside IIT. So at a certain level, so that was not, let me put it this way, that wasn't endowment. That was project-based funding. Okay, like for example, let's just to name a couple. Nanda Nilekani, who was one of the founders of Infosys, stayed at Hostel 8. Okay, so he took it upon himself to improve Hostel 8, every part of Hostel 8, and he funded it. Okay, he also put in funds for a new hostel. So what happened was that people, it was almost, as Ashish said, we were fortunate that it was actually almost without anything from IIT. It was alumni doing it, alumni running it, everything was being done by them. So that kind of gave that, see, to a certain extent what Ashish was saying, that a lot of people are very, very clear about that whatever they're giving the fund, that is used for some of the things that they want to improve and not for general paying salary or something of that sort. Okay, so I think that was taken care of. Now, as far as the industry, okay, now a lot of the industry funding also.
Pradipta, do you mind if I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
Just, I think Pradipta has done a wonderful job of crediting the alumni, but I do want to go and recognize, and this started with what Ashish said, people like Pradipta, going back to Sunil Mishra, going back to Professor Sukhatme. So the alumni stayed engaged because the internal leadership recognized it, facilitated it, and delivered on expectations. I am not sure that happened in any other IIT. It certainly did not happen at IIT Delhi anywhere near as well as IIT Bombay in those days. Sorry, Pradipta.
Yeah, sure. No, and so now coming to the industry part, I must add, again, there, it was really funny. Again, all the initial industrial interaction that IIT Bombay had was driven by alumni in that industry. Okay, so to a certain extent, alumni of IIT Bombay, even the industrial thing that has happened has been due to the alumni. Okay, even today, I was telling you, Pradeep, that we created this IIT Bombay Monash University Research Academy which is housed in IIT Bombay, where there's a lot of industry that's come on board. Okay. Now there also you'll find that almost 70% of the industry who've come on board have been driven because some of our alumni are at the top management level of those institutions. Okay, so alumni being a very large stakeholder has paid tremendous dividends in IIT
So,
Bombay.
Pradipta, I have to acknowledge what Sunil Chopra said. You see, let's kind of revisit that you are taking in the cream. The cream is then passing out after certain value addition by the IITs. They go on to leadership position in the industry, academia, and the real world. What is important is that you created a platform for the alumni to be engaged. See, that is, I think, the biggest in terms of creating that ecosystem, where is it? And for that, I want to go to Sunil Chopra and I want to ask him that how do you think, it is being done at places like Kellogg, etc.
Well, I would say generally most places are, so I would say the couple of places which do it, in my opinion, absolutely at the top would be Harvard and Stanford. And they do it in Harvard and Stanford do it in very different ways. Harvard and this is an outsider's perspective as well. And I would say the rest, so Kellogg included, we do a fairly good job. I don't think we do as good a job as Harvard and Stanford do in terms of engaging our alumni. And that really starts with the way Ashish said, you have to engage them while they are still students. And then you have to stay engaged with them throughout, right? Ultimately, engagement is a two-way street. It cannot just be keep giving us money, right?
Exactly.
It has to be that you get something in return, whether that something is the opportunity to be part of the network we are currently part of, right? We are all sort of here on this call. Two, it makes a huge professional difference. So I think ultimately, the IITs have sort of worked that way because we just got to know each other so well personally, so often, even for professional things, you reach out to an IIT peer from the old days simply because you were socially connected. But I think the IITs, IIMs, every educational institution has an opportunity to offer that platform where, whether it is at the personal level, it is at the professional level, this network is one of the first networks that people think of reaching out to, whether things are good and I'm looking to hire somebody, or things are bad and I'm looking for a job, or I'm looking for a supplier, or I'm looking for a customer, or whatever, or I'm looking for an expert, whatever the issue might be. I think the IITs in particular, I don't think there is any other set of institutions in the world which have the opportunity to really create this network and platform. I mean, after all, if you look at, Pradipta mentioned Infosys, a lot of those are former IIT people. You pick any, senior person anywhere in the world, of course, including India, they are very likely to be a former IIT student. So think of the platform if all of those could be brought together. Of course, endowment and donations will come out. That is going to be sort of, a natural outcome. But this is such a powerful network, I think, whose power has not yet fully been unleashed. It is largely so far, small networks and really unbelievable individuals who have accomplished so much. So to me, going back to the IITs, here the opportunity is really very large.
I couldn't agree more with you, because you see, having a focus as an endowment fund as an end by itself does not make sense. you have to have a wider engagement, on an ongoing engagement, where the spin-offs are going to be either in endowment fund or XYZ kind of stuff. I think it is absolutely creating the platform and getting that engagement. So, lovely thoughts. And I want to go to Ashish. Ashish, industry academia collaboration. Now we are talking in terms of, getting the industry input, because you see, we see this disconnect. I mean, I was very surprised recently. I mean, 2 years back when I heard that IIT, or not 2 years, 1 year back, that IIT Delhi was setting up a center for artificial intelligence. And I said, I scratched my head and I said, what? AI is now going mainstream. It is no longer an emerging technology. So the question is that sometimes we've got this disconnect between industry and academia. Sometimes industry is acting at ground level or maybe at the basement, and academia is at 100,000 feet. So what are your thoughts, Ashish, in terms of industry academia collaboration?
Pradeep, if you look at some of the frontiers of research and practice, and I'll mention two of these. One is biotechnology and the other one is software. In both these, industry academic participation is not a bonus. It is an absolute requirement. So it is no surprise. Sunil Mishra is here. He will vouchsafe what I'm saying. Basically, the entire geography of Cambridge has changed, the town of Cambridge in Massachusetts, because you have an entire biotech industry that has grown up around MIT area because of very active collaboration between industry and academia. You look at AI, you were mentioning, Pradeep, AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence, absolutely critical. So this is something which is very important and very critical for the future. I think in India,
Ashish has, I think, having some connectivity issues. So let me go across to Pradipta on the same question while we wait for Ashish to connect back. Pradipta, Ashish talked about very good, or Ashish is coming back now. Let him continue the. Yes, Ashish, you are back and you are on mute. If you can unmute yourself. Okay, so while we wait for Ashish to get his connectivity
Hello.
back, Pradipta, I want to go across to you and ask you that how is industry, Ashish described the situation which is happening in the US, but how is it happening in India?
See, one of the things is that what Ashish talked about is something that, let me put it this way, Cambridge and, the Palo Alto area. US has been very, very, this thing that it goes from the lab to the industry, and the industry grows out of, the university. In India, the IITs, you see, you have to understand that has happened over institutions that are more than 150 years old, land grant, and Harvard, maybe even, you're talking about 1500s, I mean, so these, whereas if you look at the IITs in terms of institutional age, okay, they're relatively younger, okay. So in the kind of the thing of things, industry grew, okay, but let me put it this way, even today in the frontier areas, as Ashish was talking about, in the frontier areas, even in India, okay, there's a huge amount of interaction. And in fact, let me put it this way, in IIT Bombay, and this is true of other IITs also, a lot of the centers that have been created, okay, the centers have been created by funding from industry, and industry actually get, this industry people are kind of co-opted in academia, our faculty go to, there's this mixing that's happening, and out of this mixing comes up a lot of new tech. So in the frontier areas, this is true. Okay, but in the more established areas, it's a little bit more nebulous. Okay, in the frontier areas, there's definitely, for example, there's a center for hydrogen, which is essentially funded by industry, which is working in the hydrogen space. Okay, there's hydrogen energy. Okay, there's a center for medical imaging, kind of health, this thing, which actually has hospitals, pharmaceutical, imaging companies, from India and abroad, all participating together, and all embedment and both ways. So that is happening in India. Okay, it's not at as mature a level as Ashish and Sunil are talking about in the US.
So, and Ashish, you are back. Do you want to complete your? And the question that I wanted to ask you was that you described a situation, what was happening in the US, but what has been your experience in India? Ashish, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I must have said something the Zoom gods took, this thing out, and but I'm glad to be
Yeah,
back.
technology also has moods. I agree with you.
So actually, I agree entirely with Pradipta that there is enormous opportunity and a lot going on in the Indian context. And I am a little removed from IIT, but I can tell you from IIMA perspective. In fact, one of my IIM colleagues, Somnath, is here. He's worked very closely with a center in IIM Ahmedabad. There are numerous centers that have come up at IIM Ahmedabad, and I'll probably not be able to even list all of them. There's a Center for Financial Inclusion, there's a Center for Gold Policy, there is a Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, there's a Center for Logistics, and these centers are centers for Center for Pharmaceuticals, for healthcare. These centers are extraordinarily vibrant platforms where we get practitioners, we get academics, and they are doing research with impact. And one of the nice things in India is there is a tremendous opportunity to make a difference. So what I'm finding, at least in IIM Ahmedabad, I found firsthand, is there is great willingness and desire on the part of the industry to interact, so long as you are not doing some esoteric work which has no relevance to their horizons. And in fact, academics who are interested in addressing knotty problems, K-N-O-T-T-Y problems, knotty problems of this current world, they feel very excited to be actually doing things in the field.
But so that is exactly the question, actually, Ashish, because what happens is, I'll give you two perspectives. One is that, alumni who have contributed to set up these centers of excellence have come up and said that, most of the energy was actually spent in trying to get those academic folks to understand what industry wants. Number one. Number two is that, you see, the academia's KPIs are very much linked to the papers that they publish, which nobody possibly reads, or they are how many times they are cited. So this disconnect in between the KPIs, how does that pan out?
Pradeep, I actually think these are issues that have to be crossed. These are problems you face that you have to address. But I kind of suggest to you, like any economist, look at revealed preference. How many centers did IIMA have 10 years ago? I think one center for innovation and entrepreneurship. How many centers does IIMA have today? Probably 10 or 15 centers. Now, are all 10 or 15 equally productive? Probably not. Somnath is just saying more than 10. But are some of these very vibrant? Yes, they are. What is the consequence of their being vibrant? Faculty has got resources, they are doing exciting work, they are having an impact, and this acts like a motivation for others to actually do work which has relevance. So Pradeep, I recognize the problems, but please look at what is happening. And
No. I am very much across, but I am being the devil's advocate, and I want to push you guys on a spot. So that's where so let me go across to Sunil Chopra. Sunil, what is your perspective on industry academy and what is happening at Kellogg's?
So, I will go. I think Ashish and Pradipta have both given excellent examples of top-down approaches to try to create linkages, and centers are what I would really call top-down approaches. It's between the leader of the educational institution and often somebody who is willing to give some money. So these are top-down approaches to try to create the interaction. But as Pradipta said, when it came to endowment, IIT Bombay for not just years, I would say more than a decade, was just way beyond the other IITs because it started with Professor Sukhatme, then Ashok Mishra. So every succeeding director sort of continued that. But the key was that started to create interactions, right? So again, I will go back. I think the best industry academic interactions occur from the bottom up, rarely from the top down. I would say 1 in 5 top down efforts really play out well, and the other 4 are okay. So to me, ultimately coming back to the platform, so I'll just give you a recent example. A student of mine who just finished his PhD. Well, how did it start? The CEO of one of the big furniture companies in the US is a former student of mine. He came, we have a problem. I said, okay, well, I'm going to send, are you willing to pay for my PhD student to be an intern with you? And out of that came an academic. And we have to recognize, as you said, the KPIs are different, right? So as CEO, he's interested in solving a specific problem. I'm mildly interested in solving specific problems. Let me be honest, as a professor, I'm mildly interested in solving specific problems. I'm very interested in, if there is a specific problem, can I abstract it to a more general problem where I have something meaningful to say, right? So there are like a million consultants, maybe thousands of whom I have trained who are really good at solving specific problems, better than I am as a professor. Go hire them if you want only your specific problem solved. I have to be very honest, right? Go hire them. They are my former students. This is what they do for a living. This is not what I, as a professor, do for a living. I do not solve specific problems. But, to go from specific to abstract, the interaction has to be somewhat longer. It cannot be an episodic where I fill in an RFP and something happens. So just going back to my former student, who was the CEO of the company. I've known him for 25 years. We talk regularly. This goes back to what Ashish and Pradipta defined as engagement, right? Out of that, so he knows what to come to me with and what, I will also tell him, here is a consultant, go to the consultant. They will do a better job than I can. So again, going back to what you said about, we have to recognize that the differences in KPIs are there. But as a professor, I will fight tooth and nail to maintain those differences in KPI, right? I don't want to be evaluated as a consultant. I do not want to be evaluated as a consultant. I want to be evaluated as an academic. Now we can debate what is the appropriate evaluation as an academic. We can absolutely debate that, right? So I again go back to sort of, the whole point of this series of lectures that sessions you're organizing. I think once you create a platform, and at business schools, we are generally blessed because we have things like executive education where, I have to go and stand in front of people that do things, supply chain management for a living, and I have to talk to them about supply chain management. I can only be esoteric for so long, right? So I think in some sense, for business schools, executive education has forced faculty who engage in that part of the business school education to really understand what industry wants and learn a little bit of how to bring it into sort of the academic domain. So executive education is one platform, but I think the more platforms that can be created for industry education interaction, these things naturally begin to happen. And then I think the top-down approaches will become more successful.
I think a very, very valid point in terms of the bottoms up approach and between the tactical problem solving and taking it to a bigger macro perspective. Oh, I love it. Back to
Pradeep,
now, I want to go to Pradipta. Pradipta, see,
Pradeep, if I could interrupt for a second, I want to tell all my learned professors that as an industry guy, I love the interns. So keep sending them over. They're the cheapest way we have to solve problems. You love them.
let me in the meanwhile then go across to Ashish. Ashish, what is happening is that today it is really about time to market, which is the critical factor, and then ongoing sustaining your market leadership means being ongoing innovation. Now, what that means is the ability of companies or people to have more, topical skill based ecosystems within their organization. Do you see that happening? We saw that micro credentialing, to a certain extent addressing that. We saw that focus on skilling coming into higher education. What do you see as the future of education?
Yeah, so Pradeep, this actually takes me back to an earlier part of our conversation, where I think you and Pradipta were talking about MOOCs and so on. So I think MOOCs are, for example, a wonderful way to democratize knowledge. On the other hand, increasingly people are looking for, and not on the other hand, in addition, complementary to that, people are increasingly looking for bite-sized packages of learning.
Absolutely.
Particularly, and the approach to learning is not, there used to be this kind of different phases of life theory, learn, earn, and then kind of retire and enjoy. Now you do both learning and work side by side, and you kind of keep upskilling or reskilling what you are doing, even as you are working. So education has become over a longer horizon and more bite-sized pieces. So I see increasingly, Pradeep, your question was, can I take a course in IIT Roorkee, another course in IIT Bombay, and kind of stitch them together? I think already people are looking for and asking those. So some of the things Pradipta mentioned to Coursera, edX, and others, they increasingly educational institutions led by EdTech, led by people who are more at that horizon, are moving to a way where you will do focused courses, you will get kind of some sort of credential batches, some people call them. You will knit them together over a period of time, get a diploma or something. So you get credentials which are valued, you learn in a way that is appropriate for you. And by the way, learning is increasingly blended. So some things you can easily learn online, just attending some good, active, unidirectional, asynchronous online setting. Some cases, it is really valuable to have some sort of a blended learning. Pradipta mentioned that increasingly online is moving towards simultaneous online. Some of it is, some work is online, some work is in-person learnings. Some still is getting together in a community. So you will have blended learning, you will have bite-sized pieces, you will have credential across these bite-sized pieces. And I'll give you another example. One of the big four, it's no secret, Ernst & Young.
Yeah, I know.
They merged with a university here in Boston area called HULT. And basically they are taking the HULT MBA, they are doing batches inside Ernst & Young for courses that people take within EY or with Coursera, knit them together and get an MBA degree, which is, by the way, accredited. And so the world is moving increasingly towards this kind of knitting things together with modular learning. The interesting aspect here is, and for places like India, it's very exciting because increasing access without losing impact. Because very often when you give access at a lower cost, people have traded off impact. this is leading to a situation where lots of people are able to access education, but they are able to access it at very high quality. Of course, there are sort of second order consequences when if distribution is very easy, what happens to niche courses, it leads to some superstar phenomena and all that, but those are second order. That's the direction education is moving toward. There are these kind of strange things called university physical buildings, which people will at some point be wondering, what are the physical assets for? Are they too much to do what we are currently doing?
So, Ashish, that has been talked about since 2016. But of course, there are a lot more questions, but we will continue in the interest of time. But some interesting perspective, but still.
Can I just say two things though, Pradeep, on this? One,
Sure.
I agree with you. It's been talked forever. One of the biggest barriers to introducing blended learning has been not the demand side, but the supply side.
Absolutely, it is.
Have been very worried about getting
their own power.
And the second thing I will say in that is pandemic. Pandemic has been terrible in many ways, but one thing it has taught people is, guess what? You can actually get a lot done online.
Yeah, that's right. Love it. Love it. Now, moving on to Pradipta. Pradipta, what are your thoughts about the new education policy? Does it answer some of the questions that we've been talking about?
Okay, let me just and this is again a skeptic from an academic point. Okay, policies are wonderful. Okay, there was a national education policy of 1985. Okay, which wasn't implemented in its totality. Okay, so I one of the things that one legal luminary once told me is India has the best laws in the world. It is the implementation of the laws that leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm putting it this way: national education policy as a concept is a fantastic concept. How it will be put together remains to be seen. I think I would just put it that way.
You are.
I would like to just add to what Ashish is talking about. Pradeep, one of the points that I would like to say is all this blended learning and all these kind of things are very good once you have a basic background. And in my mind, okay, let's say the first kind of tertiary degree should not be skill based at all. It should more be about kind of teaching ways of solving, not so much as specifics rather than more abstract thoughts of solving. So I still feel the first level of tertiary education is where university education is very, very important, which is really looking at basic concepts. The blended learning and all of those come in one. If you start at the first year of blended learning, you're going to get people who know a lot about, as I said, there's the two aspects. You know less and less about more and more, or do you know more and more about less and less? That is the conundrum of education.
I loved your point, when you mentioned about the policy aspect, because end of the day, the proof is in delivery. And then you can have the best policies in the world, but if the ground reality doesn't change, what the hell, it doesn't make any difference. So, fabulous. I want to go across to Sunil Chopra. Sunil, what is the value proposition of a higher education degree? You see, in Australia, we are in a situation, virtually in a situation where employer says, leave aside the pandemic and the current situation, where the employer says, I have a need of skill X and I have a budget of $Y. If you have that, come and meet me and do the job, and nice meeting you. Thank you very much. Bye bye. It doesn't matter whether you have permanent, contract, temporary, all that kind of a thing. That's where the labor market is heading towards. So why should I spend 5 years and take on a debt of $100,000 and go to this thing when I could have a startup or I could have anything different pathways? So what are your thoughts, Sunil?
I think that's what you raised is an absolutely valid point. In the sense, this is not true, say, yet at the IITs, but it's certainly true for, say, business education in the US. The tuitions that we charge are, this is the example that I would say. An MBA student who comes to, let's say, either Kellogg or Harvard is spending, roughly speaking, $100,000 a year, right? So that's $200,000. At a minimum, they gave up a job earning $100,000 a year. So you add that up, that's $400,000. And when I last checked, I could buy somewhere between 6 and 8 models of the Ferrari for less than that. So, if you think about what so this is one point. Second point, if I look at, if you look at it from a very tactical perspective, how much do I spend versus how much do I earn? That ratio has been going down. But I do want to point out one other thing, which is what's happening in society has been bailing us out as education. Because what's happening in society is with the increasing differentiation, if you are educated or not educated, the people not educated are getting hammered so badly that still the relative value of education from a pure monetary perspective has stayed, compared to the alternative, is very high. So you, Pradeep, are right. If I can set up a startup, go set up a startup. But, on how many people are going to succeed at a startup if they have not been through the network, the education? If you look at most people that succeed at startups, we think of Bill Gates, we think of Steve Jobs, we think of like the 3 people who succeeded, or Zuckerberg, right? But most people succeed at a startup after they have been through an IIT, they have been through a Kellogg, they have been through a Harvard. So, there are 2 things I want to point out. The absolute value that education provides has been diminishing in monetary terms. Society, however, has created so many other problems. The median incomes are tanking, which means the relative value that education provides has arguably been increasing, not because of anything education did, nothing because of what education did, but because of the way the economy, everything has structured over the last 30 years. That's bailed us out as educators. I think COVID and other things really offer an opportunity. It's kind of like a wake-up call. As Ashish said, the problem in education was more on the supply side. To me, the picture that I will kind of draw is the changes in retailing, right? 15 years ago, well, if you didn't have a large physical footprint, well, how can I do retailing without that? But I want to point out, then along comes Amazon, and in the beginning, you think you don't need a physical footprint. But think of what Amazon has spent money on in the last 20 years, expanding its physical footprint, right?
Warehouses everywhere.
Not just warehouses, their biggest, people talk of drones, but their biggest experiment is in retail formats. They have a bookstore, they have a retail store, they have a convenience store, now they have a supermarket. I'm just talking about, these are not even new retail formats. These are ancient. Kirana store is the convenience store, is an ancient. Look at what they are doing in India. They are thinking of Amazon Easy, which is with physical small locations. My point is, once the providers have woken up to, ultimately it has to be omni-channel. We call it blended, as Ashish and Pradipta used, but we all know that the right answer is omni-channel. And then that allows a student, I'm just going to call them a student, to engage with, so each of us becomes like platforms, and it allows the student to engage with the platform in multiple ways where we can serve them in the most appropriate manner. Having said that, I'm just going to say, I don't think we are ever going to be, all of us, whether it is the IITs or Harvard or Kellogg, are going to fight tooth and nail to try to fight against the following, that you actually go and take courses in each places and you get a common credential. I have a colleague who has done a lot of work on competition in not-for-profits. Look at healthcare, right? Pradeep, what you just asked would be the most natural thing in healthcare, right? We even have electronic medical records. And guess what? Even with electronic medical records, if I got my first 2 vaccines at CVS, Walgreens does not know when I go for the booster that I got the first 2 vaccines. I'm just saying. So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
so, that common credential, if you are ever expecting Harvard and Kellogg to give you that common credential, it's going to happen after my lifetime. I can
I
tell you
love
that.
it, love it. See, the critical takeaways that I had from your this thing was to recognize the fact that 98% of all startups fail. That's number one. And the number two was that it comes down to what is the comparative ROI from a higher education degree as compared to other pathways. So I love it. Now, I think this session has been so interesting that I may at a later point in time re-invite all three of you because it's a very engaging conversation. But what I want is one last minute comment for today, then let me start again alphabetically and then go to Ashish. Any last minute comments on our, what you would like to say before I ask Sunil to summarize it?
Pradeep, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm just grateful that we had this opportunity to engage. Learned a lot, actually, listening as always to Sunil and to Pradipta, and your questions were fabulous. It's been a wonderful way to start my weekend. So that's all. That's my last minute comment only, Pradeep.
It's been
Appreciate
really.
your enthusiasm and your willingness to invest time and energy. This doesn't happen easily. You are in Australia, Sunil Chopra, it is way early in the morning. We are all over here, and so thank you. I just want to thank you for organizing this for all of us.
Thank you very much. It was really fabulous. And then over to you, Pradipta. Any last minute comments?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I echo Ashish's thing. I just wanted to make one point in relation to what Sunil said. And I quote Larry Page because I had a personal interaction with him once. He said very clearly, you do not, the Mark Zuckerbergs and those are gone. That age is gone. He says, without a PhD, do not start a startup. Otherwise you're bound to fail today because the level at which you have to work is at very high level. So I think I must thank you, Pradeep, for putting us all together. It's always wonderful, to have Ashish and Sunil and both the Sunils, Mishra and Chopra. It's been fun, and of course, getting those comments from others also have been fantastic. I've been reading all the comments.
Love it, love it. Over to you, Sunil Chopra.
Well, when I was at IIT, most of my learning occurred from my peers. So I think, same has happened today, but I really sort of thank you, Pradeep and Sunil Mishra for, there are people who have to curate the commons. And so I'm grateful that you guys are doing that. And, I hope this platform really takes off.
It's such an amazing discussion today, and I have to only got to cut it off in the interest of time. But we will leave it. And Sunil Mishra, over to you to summarize the discussions today.
To paraphrase what Pradipta said, for some of us who know less and less about less and less, this has been a fabulous conversation. It sort of reminds me in many ways of the sessions we used to have in the hostel where it was free flowing and we would have dialogue and different points of view. And learning from our friends here has just been phenomenal, right? And the only thing I can say is we just continue. We need to do more of these the points of view and the experiences that we have and that we can convey to the alumni community at large. I think they're just boundless, right? Ashish said that earlier. One of the things IIT lacked, we had a community that we created sort of organically when we came together, right? And just providing a platform to extend that network across, different batches, different geographies. And this is the kind of engaging dialogue that makes it happen. So my heartfelt thanks to Ashish, Sunil, and Pradipta. Really great connecting and really great seeing you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate Ashish, Pradipta, Sunil, both the Sunils for taking the time out, for having such a freewheeling discussion. And I thank everybody else for joining in, and there are tons of other people who are looking forward to the YouTube video. And like I said, that this is a journey that we are on. It's baby steps at the moment where we are taking, but the kind of response that we are getting from the larger community is absolutely fabulous. So, folks, once again from Sydney And thank you all, especially to our distinguished speakers and to Sunil Mishra for the lovely session today. This is Sydney. This is Pradeep signing off. And once again, enjoy your morning cup of tea, evening glass of wine, afternoon lassi, or whatever it might be in your part of the world. Take care till next time.